Hello, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to continue on to this Ethereum Bangkok Day with a panel on DeFi. And I'm very happy to be joined with Charles, Imran, and Benjamin for this conversation where we're going to talk about what to expect for DeFi on the next year, 2023. So thanks a lot for joining. And thanks, Charles, Imran, Benjamin, for being with us. And I guess we can just start with a quick round of intros. For those who are just joining, I'm Guillaume with Atato. And let's go and start with Charles. If you could tell us a bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Guillaume and the team at Atato and all the community of Ethereum in Thailand for organizing this new edition of ETH Bangkok. Super happy to be here again. So I'm Charles. I was with Consensus until a few months ago. I joined the DYDX Foundation. I'm the CEO of the DYDX Foundation. So we are essentially a decentralized exchange focused on derivatives and perpetuals. And the foundation is focusing on essentially animating the ecosystem, coordinating some works of the developers of the software, as well as taking care of the ecosystem in general around DYDX. DYDX is today sitting on the layer 2 on the top of Ethereum via Starkware, but we are also very busy building the version 4 of DYDX protocol, which is built out of the Cosmos SDK and should be launched later next year. Very good to be here.
Awesome, and congrats for all the amazing launches at DYDX this year, Charles. And let's go next to Benjamin, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Ben from QiDAO Protocol. We're a CDP stablecoin on like 14 chains, mainly Polygon, Avalanche, a lot of the scaling solutions, recently on Ethereum as well. Yeah, and I've been at QiDAO since the beginning. I'm one of the founders and been in crypto for a while as well. A lot of infrastructure projects before.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. And congrats for everything that QiDAO has launched this year, especially. Awesome progress. And let's go on to Imran.
Thanks, Guillaume. Hi, everyone. My name is Imran. I'm the head of marketing for Kyberswap. So Kyberswap is the flagship product for Kyber Network. So Kyber Network, we started 5 years ago, famously under the advisory of Vitalik Buterin. So we launched on Ethereum. Today, our decentralized exchange, Kyberswap, really focuses on helping users trade smart. So during the bear market, it's about how do you survive, how do you earn smart, how do you save every dollar, being super efficient, helping users access DeFi, make it easy, safe, secure for all. So you can access us on 14 chains as well, obviously including Ethereum, Matic, Arbitrum, Optimism, but also BNB, Solana as well, which we recently launched. So on DeFi Llama today, you can probably find us as number 4 to number 6 DEX in terms of daily volume. And it's been a very tough climb, especially during the bear market to push this. And I think there's a lot more to go yet. So that's about Kyberswap.
Thanks, Imran. And yeah, for sure, 2022 is a year we're going to remember. Like you said, it's been tough for some people, and it's interesting you mentioned this focus on, ensuring that traders can survive. So how do you see them surviving in 2023? And also, how do you see your company just impacting the DeFi space in general? I guess all of you have exciting projects and announcements in the pipe. So why don't we go back to you, Imran, to start? If you could tell us a bit about what's cooking for next year.
Great. So I think it's about what do we see for the DeFi space in the most immediate term. I think if you go back to the users are kind of spooked. If you look at the failures in the market, it's actually not a failure of on-chain ecosystem. It's a failure of centralization. And I think it really calls back to the idea of building decentralized protocols. If you look at what we are trying to do, Kyber has always been innovating and shipping in DeFi even before people called it DeFi. So after we ICO'd, we were involved in some consortium achievements and work such as inventing Wrap Bitcoin for the whole ecosystem. and the genesis of projects like 1inch, Zilliqa. So Kyber has always been very, very involved in the DeFi space and also survived multiple bear markets. So I think for us, the future is really looking at how do we make it even more interoperable, making it more secure. I think part of the movement for retail users now is to look at, okay, what are real alternatives to central exchanges and some central platforms? And I think together with that, there are some UX improvements for the whole of DeFi we probably need to look at in terms of simplicity, to make it easy to use, to make it not so complex for first to DeFi users. But I think there are also a lot of other technological advancements that we're looking at, everything from CKPs to privacy-focused DEX that we are looking at and building upon. I think there's a lot of these things which are under R&D right now, so I can't say for sure any of these things that are actually coming out. So that's a mixture of looking at making it simple to use for the users and looking at what the technological innovations that will push the space forward. And then I think the last chunk is really looking at partnerships that can drive DeFi and us forward. So if you look at Ben and QiDAO, actually Ben and QiDAO are a great partner of Kyber's. So we work with them on some liquidity mining and other co-marketing partnerships. And we do the same for most of the other major chains, including Ethereum, Polygon, AVAX, where we look at how do we make it rewarding, easy to use, exciting to use for users, rolling out liquidity mining campaigns, rolling out efficient trades with our dynamic routing across all the chains. And recently we integrated things like multi-chain. We have other DEXs like ThorSwap that recently integrated our pools as well. So I think a lot of it is really looking at just incrementally improving our ecosystem integrations. And that's really a big part of entrenching ourselves into the space and making things interoperable.
Awesome. Thanks, Imran, for the super comprehensive answer. So it's interesting that a lot of what you mentioned revolves around scalability, privacy, interoperability, and UX, which were four of the main things that were being discussed in the earlier panel around infrastructure. So I guess the whole industry is focused on solving the same issues. That gives us a good chance to actually pull it off. What's your take on it? What's your view for next year? Charles, going to you. Oops, Charles, we need you to. Yeah.
Sure. I think after the fiasco of Luna, 3AC, Celsius, BlockFi, FTX, it has been really a tough year, but it's also bringing a lot of attention from regulators. So I think we should all expect regulators paying much more attention to the space in general, because millions of people essentially have been impacted by this crisis so far. So it's just it requires from regulators to be paying much more attention to the space in general. So I think every project we need to review a little bit where they stand and make sure they've got their things in order and they're not crossing any lines anywhere. So regulations is definitely something coming into the space in a much more I would say active way than it was before. So that's one thing. I think it's also one time for the space in general and for DeFi to re-engage with regulators and demonstrate to the regulators that smart contract essentially can be their best friend, and that decentralized finance is essentially the big winner of these dramas we've been going through over the past months. If you think of all the people who lost money in the dramas in the past weeks, the only people who get their money back was actually the smart contracts. So DeFi has been essentially very fair with all its users. And it's only centralized entities which have been misbehaving and burning fingers of many. So coming back to the engagement with regulators, I think it's a time for the space to kind of proactively stay engaged with regulators and demonstrate to them one by one and kind of reverse engineer what the regulator wants to achieve and how decentralized finance can fit with many of these requirements from regulators in general. Those regulations exist for some reasons, and I think we should not be afraid of embracing them, because eventually this is the direction of travel for for everyone here, and it doesn't make sense to try to avoid it or avoiding these conversations. And when we are engaging with these regulators, I think it's important not to pitch DeFi, but really demonstrate that DeFi is part of a solution for a more modern finance. And I think so far, too many of us have been kind of highlighting the ease of use and the simplicity and the low cost and everything, but that's not exactly what regulators are looking for. So that's one thing I think we should be paying attention in, is remaining engaged with regulators and keep building as well. That's the second point. Keep building product where the user intention is really at the center of the product, and having products which are not having an hidden agenda behind or anything like this. Eventually, again, mid-term to long-term, these kind of solutions win, and the market will put them in favor. So that's what we're trying to do at DYDX with the version 3 of the DYDX, which is obviously already today in production. We've seen a migration of CEFI user to DeFi, and it has brought additional activity for the DYDX protocol in general. And as I mentioned, we're very excited about building the version 4, which will go one step further in terms of decentralization. As you may know, there is only so many components in DeFi which are truly decentralized, unless you're an AMM, where you control your smart contracts are sitting on the chain. There is always bits and pieces of your essentially your trading flow, which will potentially sit on off-chain on a centralized database for performance issues or for some other reasons. And with version 4 of DYDX, the protocol is aiming at really building a chain which is dedicated to the use case of trading, as well as having an order book, which is a special type of exchanges, an order book which will be sitting on chain as well. So more technically, it will be sitting on the memory of the validators on the chain. And the goal is really to keep progressing and having a piece of infrastructure and a public good piece of software, which is truly and fully decentralized. So it's a very big endeavor, very ambitious mission for the team, but we are progressing well, and we look forward to launch this next year.
Congrats, Charles, and thanks for bringing up the topic of regulation. It's interesting to see how the regulators are gonna approach DeFi, right? Given that most of the regulation that exists today is around CeFi operators. I guess what's been happening in Europe with MiCA gives us early signs of how the DeFi aspect might be regulated in some ways. And congrats for you know, the huge milestone of having an on-chain order book. This is a common complaint that people had with the way DEX were operating in the past. And it's amazing to see that those types of problems are being solved. How about you, Ben? What do you think is going to be QiDAO's contribution to some of the issues that we've spoken about?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Charles that, you know, you can't negotiate with smart contracts, right? And it's beautiful because you saw it with Celsius. When they were going down, they still paid their Aave debt. You know, SBF, you know, he still had to pay his debt, and Abracadabra. And so definitely smart contracts are the future. I can't really speak to like regulations because I think they don't really know what they're doing. Like one of the biggest contributors to regulations in the US was SBF. He just stole money from a bunch of people. So I think there's gonna definitely need to be a little bit of a reset of where are people in the government getting their information from, what kind of assumptions have they been making. I mean, if they were following somebody like SBF and it turns out he was like a scam artist, right? What does that mean for everything that they have learned so far, and how would that change the regulations? I think we're gonna see a lot of rethinking of assumptions in terms of regulations, in my opinion. But moving more towards like the stable coins and how I see it for the next year, I think we've lost a lot of stable coins. We've lost a ton of stable coins. I mean, think about Iron Finance, UST, others that politically I can't mention because, you know, we don't fund other projects. But a lot of them we've lost. And I think right now, in terms of decentralized stablecoins, if you look at stablecoins like under 0.2% normalized volatility, we only have 4. We have MIM, we have ours, we have Frax, and we have DAI. That is the only like major stablecoins that are maintaining stability below 0.2%, which is insane. I think it really speaks to there being some sort of an issue with the way that we're running stablecoins today. I mean, that's one issue. I mean, another one is the fact that during a bear market, people haven't really changed how CDPs worked. And as a result, the market caps are going down. And more worryingly, all these other stablecoins, out of the 4 that I mentioned, 3 of them are like 80% USDC. And so then you start to think about what are we really doing here? Like what sort of a system are we creating? And USDC, I don't see it as a problem because of the centralization of it. USDC, I see it as a problem because the opportunity cost that like the LPs to USDC have is great, because they can just take their money out and put it in real estate, putting in JP Morgan, in Citibank, and get a better rate. And so USDC, I'm pretty bearish, and I think it's going to just keep going down. And so if we're relying on USDC to create a lot of our decentralized stablecoins, then we're going to run into a lot of problems for scalability. We're really going to limit how much stable value we can have in crypto. And so if you're talking about perpetuals, if you're talking about, you know, swaps like Kyber, like where are you going to get your liquidity from if there's no stable coins, right? And so I think the way that QiDAO is going to really bring a lot to DeFi in the next year is redefining what a stable coin is, especially in the bear market. This idea of borrowing against a volatile asset, borrowing a stable asset against a volatile asset doesn't work. I mean, you can sell umbrellas when it's raining, but when it stops raining, you got to sell something else. I mean, the market's going to tell you that, you know, you have to sell something else. And we're really happy to be working with Kyber because that's one of the many things that we're changing. Obviously, liquidity is very, very important for stablecoins. And I think people are doing it very wrong. They're taking a lot of assumptions like, you know, you're a stablecoin, you have to go to Curve, right? You know, you're bridging, you have to use multi-chain, stuff like that, like people just take for granted. And I think trying out novel ideas, like using Kyber's like elastic DEX, I think is going to bring a lot of positive changes to the stablecoin world.
Awesome. Thanks, Benjamin, and congrats for everything that QiDAO has been doing. And it's good, you know, hearing you three that we have really a comprehensive mix of answers, right? We talked about infrastructure level improvements that need to happen in 2023. We talked about maybe the need to have DeFi regulations. And then as Benjamin was sharing, you know, the difficulty in doing so. And also, you know, Benjamin coming from the angle of doing stable coins in a different way, given their importance in just having liquidity in the DeFi space. So really interesting to hear your three take, which gives us a comprehensive view of some of the challenges that DeFi is facing for next year. And Charles, coming back to you. So as you mentioned, you were previously with Consensus, you joined recently DYDX, and in particular in your role as a CEO of the foundation. And, you know, I think DYDX structure is quite interesting, and we've seen more and more protocols adopt the structure where there's a legal entity and a DAO. Can you share with us a bit more about, you know, what's your role, what's the DAO's role, and how do you think that protocols can be structured in a way that enables them to stay decentralized and work with the community, but also do some work with the regulators? It would be interesting to hear your take on it.
Sure. So the version 4 of DYDX essentially is being built right now, and it will be totally open source, and it will be eventually a chain where the software will be deployed at some point in time. The foundation is here to essentially stimulate the ecosystem around this software of the version 4, and also helping the DAOs in their early days. So there is already a grant DAO which has been launched a few months ago for around DYDX. So we support a lot of market research. We support some additional tooling for the ecosystem in general. So it's totally independent from the foundation, but the foundation has been helping essentially to build this first piece, so the community could essentially gather around this DAO and take decisions on how the grants could be assessed and eventually distributed to projects or to builders who wants to contribute to the ecosystem of DYDX. We passed a few weeks ago another vote, an important vote for the DYDX community, which was a vote on the launch of a new DAO This one will be an operation DAO. We call it the Ops DAO. So the Ops DAO will be built over the coming weeks, essentially sitting on the top of a trust in Guernsey, which is an island between France and the UK. And over the months, the community will decide what kind of operations around the protocol will be coordinated on the top of this DAO to help with the coordination of the DAO. And later, the treasury of the protocol will also be managed by the DAO itself. So today we are working on tooling essentially to help all the community and the different stakeholders of the community. Should you be an individual token holder? Should you be a future validator for the DYDX chain, or maybe an investor, an original investor, making sure that you get to understand and get included into as many decisions and as many progress of the DYDX protocol via the governance in general, which we keep iterating to make sure it's efficient. So some of the challenges we face are essentially building an efficient DAO. As you know, it's a very early topic, so many people are still experimenting on that. How much should you ask in terms of number of votes from the token holders? What kind of decision should be made with all token holders? What kind of decisions are too technical, and maybe a subgroup of technical experts should be having a more documented opinion? So all of this is being iterated right now, so that's make it extremely excited. And as a foundation, we also help with a lot of engagement in multiple countries where DYDX is very successful. So we have a lot of activities in Turkey. We have also a large community in India, in Japan, but also in many other countries in continental Europe, where there is an existing community of DYDX users and builders, and we were just helping for everyone to kind of meet and keep building together. So it's very much an ecosystem play, and also helping with the governance, so everyone can take informed decisions, and the decision processes and tooling around the DYDX DAOs get evolving at the same pace as the software is evolving.
Thanks, Charles. And I guess you must have busy days, but it's super interesting hearing how you want to structure DYDX as around today 2, maybe more DAOs in the future. And, you know, it has some parallels with how, you know, corporations just structure their legal entities. And I'm sure in some years to come, you know, we'll be studying how DAOs like DYDX we're setting up a multi-DAO structure. I'm just curious, like, are they going to be running on the same governance token, or without going too far in the topic? Just
that's a great question. To be honest, it will be decisions of the community. So today we have a very simple structure, which is a grants DAO. So there is a community treasury, and the grants DAO is helping to assess projects and distribute grants. The Ops DAO is getting off the ground. The vote was passed a few weeks ago only. So there is a lot of work by some service provider to set up the DAO and the trust, and make sure this DAO get banking relationships and get everything to be really functional for the project later on. But then there will be a series of votes which will be coming up to take all these decisions on how we want, as a community of token holders, we want this DAO to be essentially functioning. So my personal opinion, but that's again decisions are made by the community, is that we should be progressively decentralizing and thinking of efficiency first, rather than going with too much strong belief and realizing that in terms of operations later on, it makes things very complicated. And for that, we have the chance to be working into an ecosystem which is really open source and transparent. So we are learning a lot from other DAOs. We are learning a lot from researchers. But the reality of the activity of the DYDX protocol, it's eventually a topic which is extremely technical, and there is probably different which will be better to be taken by people which have experience in this kind of questions. So probably, as you mentioned earlier, there will be a component governance from the legacy world, so to say. I think the world of governance has been evolving for thousands of years, so there is a lot of learnings to get from there. And we've seen also in the early days of DAOs in general that one token, one vote, and asking too much questions and votes to a community does not really help the performance of a project. So we're still experimenting, and please follow the DYDX project and join us in this experimentation. Everything is obviously totally open book, so you can see how the conversations are going, what are the pros and cons, and how the community eventually settle via some on-chain votes in decisions which are helping the protocol to progress.
Awesome, thanks, Charles. And yeah, very exciting. I guess one day we'll see layer 1 DAOs and layer 2 DAOs or some kind of structure like this. It's or we're going to read about it in the Harvard Business Reviews on how DAOs were structured at DYDX. Congrats. And Imran, going back to you and Kyber, and then the recent events. So, you know, there is this expectation in the industry that what's been happening with CeFi will, you know, push massive adoption of DeFi. And then, in your view, is it happening, or are there still some challenges towards, you know, getting this trust and adoption of services like yours?
Great question, Guillaume. So I think if you look at the weeks or the week after the FTX collapse, I think you could see actually billions of volume and TVL actually leaving the central exchanges. So they moved into self-custody. I think concurrently, even Kyberswap experienced during this time where things seem to be burning to the ground, large spikes in our daily volumes. And even till now, we're still consistently hitting new all-time highs in daily volume. So I think there's some level of proof that users are migrating and moving to DeFi. And I think the question is it all of it? And is it that all users finally trust and understand DeFi? And I think we haven't really reached that point yet, right? So I think the issue here right now is that users finally realize that they cannot trust in CeFi anymore. Even let's say if an exchange provides a Merkle proof of reserves, you know, it can be useless if you don't really understand the liabilities of the company. It's useless if you don't really understand the actual amount of customer holdings involved. And if you just see this is how much B I have in my reserves, right? So so as the industry says, don't trust, validate. And in this case, if a user cannot validate, then you definitely cannot trust. So I think that's the exodus, or that explains the exodus now, that people realize that they cannot trust the central exchanges. I think conversely, if you look at DeFi and decentralized exchanges, we talk about bringing 1B users into the whole industry. And I think the question here is whether the central exchange users can actually onboard into DeFi right now, and will they consistently use it? And I think the answer isn't conclusive yet either. I don't think it's anywhere near that. I think it does take building the ecosystem, it does take building up the UI UX, it does take the industry collectively educating users, not just about the tech, but about best practices in DeFi, about understanding the differences in products, how does it differ from DeFi to CeFi. And at the end of the day, the goal here is to again make it efficient and easy for users. So on Kyberswap side, one of the primary tools that we provide is an aggregator. So you do that across 14 chains. It's dynamic routing, lower slippage, you know, best rates most of the time. So that's one area of efficiency that we provide. The second one is looking at liquidity pools and yield farming. And you know, thanks to Ben and QiDAO for being a partner and shouting us out. So for example, Kyberswap Elastic is a concentrated tick-based liquidity pool protocol with NFT-based liquidity mining mechanisms that allow for auto compounding as well as just-in-time attack protection. But the whole goal with all this technology is really just to make it easy to use, and as a liquidity provider, my capital is safe, my returns are safe. And I think the next chunk of user experience is looking at how do we provide information or alpha, right? When a user comes in, how do I make better decisions, and can a platform provide me those tools or that information? And I think we're looking at building more on-chain analytics tools. So for example, on Kyberswap, we have a discover function. What this means is that on Kyberswap, you can trade about 20,000 plus tokens. That's a lot of tokens to kind of do due diligence on. And if you kind of want to figure out what the best tokens are there and which could pop potentially, so we actually ran through the billions of dollars of trading volume data and into machine learning, and we created a tool which, based on on-chain data, the wallets interacted, the trading volumes, the price trend lines, can actually activate and identify tokens. So out of 20,000 plus, you have 50 tokens that represent that over the next week or so may pop or may trend. And I think that's one direction also that we're looking at, into providing more tools, more analytics, more insights, and all of these are free, including free pro trading tools on our site as well. So I think lastly to mention, I think, is that I think users, some of them will still never touch something that is not licensed. So I think DeFi will have to accept that as long as we are operating on the unlicensed side of the spectrum, there will always be a segment of users that will not touch us. And I think there will also be this hit on, like what Charles mentioned, where regulators are looking at DeFi. Part of it, as Ben has mentioned, was literally a snowball because of what SBF did, which is take users' funds, lobby DC, and then create ideas and proposals to essentially destroy DeFi and keep a CeFi monopoly. And I think it's really time that DeFi comes together to, number one, kind of like think about setting standards for the industry. Is it about audits, insurance, creating a coalition? What kind of standards can we create for ourselves? And number two, talking to actual regulators as well. So if we don't want SBF and those likes of people talking to regulators, then I think DeFi actually has to come together and figure out a way to speak for the industry, to sell the industry, to sell the benefits of the industry, to sell, hey, like if you want transparency of transactions, you can actually find that on chain, right? Like that's probably something regulators love, right? And I think kind of zeroing down on what regulators are looking at and finding that middle point, because sooner or later that will come, and DeFi builders cannot build if we are in jail. And you have all these guys which are CeFi guys which are really out and about still, and then you have the programmer, the developer of Tornado Cash that built a software and is sitting in jail right now, right? So I think that speaks to the craziness of the industry right now. So Kyber was actually part of the 0 Point Forum in Switzerland that was co-organized by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And basically they brought together regulators, fintech, DeFi, crypto players together to talk about the future of regulation as well. And I think this will come, whether DeFi players like it or not, it will come probably within the next 1 to 3 years. And so I think, among other things, you have ZK proofs as technology that could potentially look at, can we satisfy certain regulatory requirements around providing some level of KYC while respecting and not holding the private data of users, right? So I think these are all things in the industry that we could be potentially looking at.
Awesome. So lots to unpack, and thanks for the super comprehensive answer, Imran. And to try to recap, you're saying that on the Kyber network itself, you've seen this surge in volume.
Yep.
You're also seeing that the surge is still there, that there's a new set of products also that are aimed at maybe making it easier for users to identify what they should be interested in, or also just to get some stake in things that are a bit complicated to wrap your head around, like the whole NFT space. And then on the regulatory side, you're saying that DeFi needs to speak for itself to the regulators, and that there is some examples of this starting to happen, and that those are efforts that are going to continue throughout 2023, if I understand right. Benjamin, then going to you, and I guess this might be one of the last questions because our panel will soon run out of time, but super interesting conversation. Now, Benjamin, QiDAO's goal, if I understand, is to solve stablecoins. And for those who might not be super clear on what is solving stablecoins, so we have the traditional asset-backed stablecoin like USDC, and then we have had an exercise with seniorized based coins like UST recently, and then we have the OG DAI, like collateral backed stablecoin. Can you tell us about what is QiDAO's approach, and why is it different? What problems does it solve?
Yeah, I mean, to start, I don't think we're trying to replace fiat-backed stablecoins. They definitely have their place in crypto. I do really think it's bad that we focus so much on the US, especially when we're talking about regulators. Like, there are plenty of countries that are open for business, like the Emirates, like Bahrain, like Qatar, that have a lot of money, have a lot of access to capital markets, and they don't come with the baggage that Americans come with, or the Europeans with the ECB comes with, right? So definitely, I think we'll see a shift towards a different market. I mean, we were talking just now about like regulators, right? Like, when there is regulation, like even regulation for DeFi, banks are gonna come and they're gonna take all the users. Like JP Morgan, Citi, they're gonna come and they're gonna make regulated CeFi, DeFi, and they're gonna take all of the Americans, right? I think we need to focus on emerging markets, and even actually Europe, I think, could count, because the economy is not doing so well, and I think a lot of people are gonna seek refuge in an alternative financial system, kind of like they have in Argentina, and to a lesser extent in Turkey and other countries that are experiencing poor central bank management. For QiDAO, I mean, we know our place, and it's not that, right? Like, that's gonna be fiat on-ramp stable coins, like, like the dirham stablecoin or like the peso stablecoin, that are going to allow people to onboard large sums of money without having to go through an exchange. That's the kind of like niche. QiDAO right now is like, I believe, the last really multi-collateral stablecoin. A lot of the CDPs, even MakerDAO, I love MakerDAO, but it's mostly USDC now. Frax is just USDC. MIM is just USDC. So we're kind of waving our flag as like, what is it supposed to be, this CDP model? Like, what are we supposed to be? And I think for us, it's going to be this bedrock for financial instruments in DeFi. And the DeFi that's going to be used in these emerging markets. And then through like liquidity pools, we'll be able to connect to a lot of these like centralized stable coins that are onboarding people.
Awesome, thanks, Ben. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear, I guess, a slightly different side of the picture, right? Where you're saying that, in your opinion, the opportunity, the problem to solve lies in enabling better access to DeFi in emerging markets.
Yeah.
While in more mature markets, the baggage of regulations, good or bad, makes it harder to do so. And they're the problems that we want to solve are different, and that, in your view, the existing players, might have an unfair advantage, if I understand. Just
Yeah, I just want to like highlight a little bit more, because like, do you guys really think that a team that maybe has 1 or 2 investors, maybe 50 million tops, like, in terms of like these like funds that like pump their TVL, do you think those teams that constantly get hacked because they don't check their code, do you think those teams are going to be multi-billion-dollar banks that have, the governments in their backs, like, and they have the trust of people that, for better or for worse, believe that they have, safety, right? Do you think, who's going to win here, right? I really think the banks are going to win that battle. So we have to just choose our battle, and it's not going to be regulated DeFi.
Cool. And thanks, Benjamin. It's awesome to have this kind of open conversation, and to also have different takes in the room. And I guess maybe if we just take a quick word to wrap up before we go on to the next panel, I would like first to thank all of you, Charles, Imran, Benjamin, for joining, and really appreciate the openness of the conversation. And I think it's really great for all our attendees to illustrate the different angles in DeFi, and also the different kind of ethos and problems that people are working on. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate all your contribution and joining today's event. I apologize that we don't have all the time to take all the questions in the chat or talk about DeFi. We could be on this call for another couple hours, and really thank you so much for your time. And next there will be a talk by the Ethereum Foundation, who's one of the sponsors of today's event, like DYDX, Kyber, and QiDAO. So thank you very much, and you have a good rest of the day, and please stay tuned to the event for Ethereum's Foundation presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.